In this one, I will be talking about some of the people that have spoken on CPAC and what they have had to say. Some names include Kareem Tadros, Chris Weisdorf, Kellyanne Wolfe, and others. And I will also be talking about Marcus Ray, as well as going over myself, Josephine LaValle, and James Scott's experience at Confederation Park in Ottawa on August 31st, as we had spoken to people such as Adrian Thomas of the Thunderbird movement and Kellyanne Wolfe. And I will be talking about different aspects of the biodigital convergence, such as the blockchain, and as well talking about some of the nanotechnologies involved. And I will be talking about Marcus Ray. So, right here, first we have Chris Weisdorf in the center. This is Kareem Tadros, and in the back is Kellyanne Wolfe. I'm not sure who this particular gentleman is as of yet. So, this is on August the 19th. It says here that Chris Weisdorf, co-founder and director of nonprofit Concerned Constituents of Canada, and Kellyanne Wolfe, CEO of the CDDA, hold a news conference in Ottawa to discuss democratic attacks and balances, media influence, and LGBTQ plus education laws. They are joined by Kareem Tadros. So, first of all, Chris Weisdorf starts off to say that he has a background in finance, but he has assisted people in the law and as a non-legal professional. He's not a lawyer or paralegal and has no formal legal training. He has stated so himself. And so he ends up saying that the concentration of power in any one branch of government is indistinguishable from tyranny. And he says that the executive power has surpassed the judicial and legislative branches of government, and mentions that Councillor Robinson having experienced this. So Councillor Lisa Robinson, I'll be going over a little bit later in the video, but basically she goes on to talk about how she has been attacked and verbally assaulted and such by other council members in the Pickering area where she is a politician. So he says that governments of all branches have subverted rights in the Charter and Human Rights Code, and no court has taken his side so far, and says that municipal and provincial governments have turned provincial offenses and municipal bylaw into quote-unquote hardcore criminal offenses, and says that this has occurred with Adamson's Barbecue, which is ran by Adam Skelly, in his defiance of not shutting down his restaurant in November 2020, defiance of lockdowns, defiance of public health orders, and he goes on to mention parking and noise infractions for the truck convoy as well. But I think most importantly what he's forgetting there, even though he doesn't really go over the financial aspect of the truck convoy, is that the parts of the truck convoy that were seized that have to do with the blockchain, like crypto donations and such, it's supposed to be decentralized, as they say, but basically when those funds got taken, it's pretty much just a way for investment firms and such to experiment with Web3 technology, which means blockchain, or plan for public policy that revolves around those technologies. So Chris Weisdorf demands quote-unquote accountability, transparency, and adherence to the rule of law as is written by the legislatures and the Parliament of Canada. So this term accountability is thrown around by several individuals, and it seems like people in this freedom movement, or whatever you want to call it, happen to utilize this word accountability constantly, and it's almost like a form of programming on a subconscious level by putting this word into different things. As, for instance, he's talking about the legal aspect and how the courts are not working in favor of the people, as if they were never built to do so anyway. But the whole point about this accountability theme, if you will, is just to bring about there are these problems that are occurring, and then you react to it, and then an artificial solution is brought in, and that artificial solution is called Evolve Blockchain, which I will be getting to, and I'll also leave links to other videos that I have made where I've covered some of these subjects. So Then Kareem Tadros is up next, so that's that particular individual there. He says he's a parent talking about issues affecting children across Canada, and he says that he can speak confidently toward the number of parents involved in the million-person march that happened last year on September 20th. He says the media downplayed the size and significance of the event. He says that they're not homophobic, transphobic, or anti-LGBTQ. He says that vocal detransitioners and members of the Pride community join them, and he says, "We stand firmly against the deliberate wave of radical sexualization of children that is becoming very commonplace in Canada, not just in our education system, but in Canadian culture as well." He also mentioned standing against nudity in public spaces and at family events and the endangerment of women and children in shared bathrooms and changing rooms, and stands for parents' rights to have a say in their children's education. He also says that if religion must be stripped and removed from the public education system, then so too must these radical ideologies. He says a multitude of criminal codes and laws are being violated every day throughout the education system, which is why he also reached out to the new Minister of Education, Jill Dunlop. He says that public schools are supposed to serve communities and families, and if they no longer serve the communities, then they should get reformed and rebuilt, otherwise to just leaving schools and finding other opportunities. So this is interesting because, again, the education system, which I'll just fairly call the indoctrination system, was never built for us as well. So once again, problem, reaction, solution, right? So it says here, built on the factory model, mass education taught basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, a bit of history and other subjects, the overt curriculum. Beneath it was the covert curriculum that was far more basic. It consisted of 3 courses: punctuality, obedience, and repetitive work. The basic training requirements to produce reliable, productive factory workers. Factory labor demanded workers who would take orders from a management hierarchy without questioning, and it demanded men and women prepared to slave away at machines or in offices performing brutally repetitive jobs. So this is paraphrased from Alvin Toffler's Future Shock. However, contrary to Toffler's description, some argue that the Prussian model of education was initially set up to instill discipline and obedience in citizens rather than to produce quote-unquote factory workers. I'm going to go over who made that Prussian model after I read this. However, most agree on the fact that the spread of industrialization created the need for compliant and literate workers. Therefore, this system was subsequently copied for this purpose by the US, UK, and other parts of the world, with great support for its adoption by industrialists. The Rockefeller influence on the education system in the U.S., industrialists like John D. Rockefeller poured a significant amount of investment into the education system. He created the General Education Board at the ultimate cost of $129 million and provided major funding for schools across the nation and was very influential in shaping the school system. He didn't exactly conceal his interest and motive in being actively involved in promoting the widespread adoption of the education system, and once stated, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." Business advisor to Rockefeller, Frederick T. Gates, a prominent member of the General Education Board, stated, "We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply." There are even reports that Rockefeller and industrial giant Andrew Carnegie played a significant role to influence the American educational agenda to direct what students were taught in school. Right, so you have the Rockefellers involved in the education system, creating workers, not thinkers, essentially, and to sort of eliminate philosophy and free thinking. And ironically, this Prussian model does come from a philosopher of sorts. Wilhelm von Humboldt was described by Friedrich Hayek as Germany's greatest philosopher of freedom, if you say so. Humboldt wrote a path-breaking defense of the minimal state, which had profound influence on John Stuart Mill. Humboldt later became director of the section for public worship and education in the Ministry of Interior. In this capacity, he directed the reorganization of the Prussian public education system, and in particular, the University of Berlin. So, Now to talk about, we're going to talk about Kelly a little bit, but first here, just to say, Kareem mentioned seeing one of the largest declines in classroom attendance and a large increase in parents resigning from positions in the public education system. We have identified and cataloged many violations in the public school system, which will expose the faculties to endless lawsuits. If parents' voices won't be heard, these classrooms will be emptied until our leaders are ready to listen to parents. We will also hold elected and appointed officials accountable for their contractual obligation to ensure the safety of the communities that they represent. There's the word accountable once again. And Kareem also addresses the police as they're not taking action to uphold the law and brings up that the community cannot have faith in them. Well, once again, policing is also something that was never built for the people. It's one letter short of policy, and fact of the matter is that the police work for the state, not the people. So then when Kellyanne Wolfe comes up, she says that she is the CEO of the Canadian Democratic Defense Association, or the CDDA, which is an internationally recognized NGO or CSO who advocates for people in Canada when they don't feel they're being represented. She says, at one of the latest outlets in our country here at CPAC, we got to hear from a counselor who was being absolutely degraded, insulted, and even assaulted within government by other government officials. Where is the Minister of Municipal Affairs? I would like to know. Why hasn't the Minister of Municipal Affairs interjected? So she also says that a society only ends up with the conditions that it asks for. That is a fact. Look around, and who's to blame? I give credit to CPAC because it is a free and open press. That's why someone like me, who can be very controversial, is able to stand up here and talk in its broadcast. So I praise and thank you. You are an example, however, to the rest of the mainstream media out there who's responsible for spreading misinformation, lies, propaganda, and infusing racism into our population. Look at what is happening to our country. Well, this is interesting here due to the fact that this mentions here that CPAC censored Counselor Lisa Robinson, and I know that this is after, as this CPAC thing that I'm talking about here is on August the 19th, and this post is from September the 1st, but I guess it's not so free and open is my point here. So she claims to have 25 years of international and civil human rights. She claims to have 25 years of international and civil human rights experience, and that only 0.1% of Muslims are radical, and that out of 17 and a debatable 26 countries in the Middle East, only 4 are Muslim, and the most Muslim people live in Indonesia. And she then goes on to say that to the Palestinian protesters in Canada, your protests have been infested and infiltrated, and make no mistake, these infestations and infiltrations consist of people who are called astroturfers, that's a term, who are paid in foreign and domestic governments in order to paint a narrative upon you, and the less that you confront those who are radical within, the more guilty you look. So take my advice and tighten up with respect to the law. So the whole idea with respect to the law right there, that's almost like a jab there trying to get people to be submissive to authorities that essentially, I don't even want to call them authorities, but things that are not even built for us. But the more important factor here is that she talks about the Palestinian protests being infiltrated, but she doesn't talk about the Palestinian protests, what actually, like boycott, divestment, sanctions, one of the many groups involved, and there are several others which I have covered in previous videos, which I'll link in the description. But boycott, divestment, sanctions, which is part of the Palestinian protests, is most prominently funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund have also investments in an organization called Foundation for Conscious Evolution, which has to do with a combination of New Age and Gnosticism and different aspects of the occult, but their way of achieving like a form of enlightenment or perfecting yourself is through transhumanism, essentially, better yet known as the Biodigital Convergence. And so they talk about things like nanotechnology and stuff like that in order to achieve, a different level of consciousness or ascension or, that sort of a thing, right? So that's who Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions is funded by. And also, fact of the matter is that I don't know very much about infiltration of these Palestinian protests, but the fact of the matter is that these Palestinian protest groups themselves are funded by nefarious parties. So infiltration is just a whole other factor altogether. So she says that an activist position is to enforce the laws when they're not being enforced, and because of these actions myself, I gained the support of members of the judiciary, lawyers across Canada, police forces, and thank God for that. But I'm here to tell you all today that this is all going to fall down. Last time I was here was February 16th of this year, and I presented the introduction to a campaign where we are creating a blockchain voting model that comes with referendums and recalls that will put the policies in the hands of the people permanently and remove the intrusion of foreign and corporate entities. It will limit government down to nothing more than a representative body and remove the political ideologies of which are partisan politics. Every one of you are liberal and conservative, and all of you in various degrees. These political philosophies applied become ideological, and they are invented and imposed for the purpose of division, because if they can't divide you, they can't control you, and this is a fact. And to every member of Parliament, this is what we become. Right now, we have been collecting independents across Canada, and thank goodness Nova Scotia is in the lead, she says. We've all got 55 independent candidates ready to go, so good luck to your political parties, because it's time for the people to take their authority that belongs to them, of which they commission you all to manage, of which you are clearly incapable of, and put it back into the hands of the people. So this is really actually just an illusion of putting power into the hands of the people through a direct democracy system, being that direct democracy is a bottom-up approach, as they would say. So essentially, the people create the bills and vote on them and things like this, and then the elected officials, which I call selected officials, are supposed to follow through by the whim of the people. So it's, again, this bottom-up approach instead of top-down approach like the parliamentary democracy, if you want to call it that, in Canada. So, but the real factor here is that the blockchain is what's being used, which is the prime backbone toward the biodigital convergence, as this is the platform that different aspects run on, such as the smart cities and that sort of a thing. So she tries to sell the illusion of being able to govern yourselves through this evolved blockchain, and also move from a parliamentary democracy to a direct democracy. So she's digitalizing government is what she's essentially doing. And even though Canada isn't a true example of democracy, especially when you factor in, social engineering and rigging elections, like the Dominion voting machines, for example, these are problems in place that an artificial solution will come into place, and that artificial solution is involved blockchain, like I said. I'll speak more to the blockchain and how it pertains to the biodigital convergence a little bit later. So here we have a specific day that had both Kellyanne Wolfe and Lisa Robinson speaking in Parliament. So first I'm going to go to Lisa Robinson over here. So she says, Pickering City Council have ensured the public cannot record their meetings, and the media can only record them if 2/3 agree, and essentially forbid people from having a voice. So this is on August the 30th. And also, too, once again, the whole idea of what is being addressed, all of these problems, is to show the lack of accountability, for lack of better words. And in this display of lack of accountability, then you have the artificial solution coming into play. So digitalizing government is the agenda here, essentially. And also, while somebody like Kelly will market this as putting the power into the hands of the people, it's really not, because everything on the blockchain can still be tracked and recorded in this illusion. This word that people use, decentralized, is really just an illusion. And we'll get to that when I read an article, or a little bit of it, called the Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mines, which I've shown in other videos. So Lisa Robinson also goes into high taxes, poverty, and food banks filling up, and that First Nations don't have clean drinking water. I think a lot of First Nations reservations don't even have running water, frankly. She says that integrity commissioners who hold significant power over elected officials are themselves unelected and paid by the municipalities that they oversee, and this creates an inherent conflict of interest, and with their loyalty lie may more with those who sign their paychecks with the principles of fairness and accountability. Once again, I ask, do we really need them? They have only been implemented in the last few years, that they wield immense influence over the democratic process. Council and the corporation of Pickering and all levels of government need to remember that it's your money. It's not just meant to be judicially for the common good, not for self-serving agendas. This is just mismanagement, is criminal neglect of duty. She says we need reforms that ensure accountability and transparency, not a facade or facade of integrity designed to protect the corrupt. In Pickering and throughout Canada, we are witnessing a disturbing trend where personal dignity is being stripped away from men, women, boys, and girls in spaces that should be safe. Bathrooms, changing rooms, people are being forced to share these spaces with members of the opposite sex. She also blasts Trudeau for funding the CBC. And as for a government claiming transparency and accountability, these have become mere buzzwords, not practices. We need to restore transparency, accountability, and trust in our institutions. So you use that word accountability at least 4 times there, and she is right that they are buzzwords, but they are buzzwords of subliminal messaging and subconscious programming. So now to talk about Kellyanne Wolfe in what she has to say here. She pretty much goes on to, for one thing, sorry, still disorganized. I just want to say here that Lisa Robinson as well is, or was, a member of the Rotary Club, and when trying to talk to her on August the 31st in Confederation Park, she ended up not wanting to be filmed, and also as well ended up saying that she was part of the Rotary Club a long time ago, but didn't really elaborate on that. So here's a video of mine. Unfortunately, the web page is not loading right now, but I used a link that showed that. So now to move forward to talk about Kellyanne Wolfe and what she had to say on August the 30th, the same day as Lisa Robinson. Just give me 1 sec to get my notes there. So Kelly basically goes on to speak once again, saying that she is the CEO of the CDDA and executive director for several grassroots organizations. And in other videos, which I'll be linking in the description just so that I don't have to fill up all the tabs here, she mentions that she is the CEO or liaison of over 447 different grassroots organizations. So she also mentions the Parents' Rights Coalition and that several grassroots organizations are supported by the CDDA, and the petition she supports is E5010 to prevent people from potentially becoming detransitioners and asked government to denounce the following WPATH in light of new findings. So WPATH stands for World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And she also mentions that Pickering councillor Lisa Robinson is being attacked and harassed from her own council, so Kelly calls on the Minister of Municipal Affairs to launch an investigation on Pickering Council, including the mayor. And she asks why the government can ban ivermectin when it was proven to save lives, but they can't take fentanyl off the streets. We're going to talk a little bit about ivermectin in a bit. And Kelly mentions that the Supreme Court of Canada implemented mandates on their staff in regards to the coercive public health measures, and she accuses Roman Baber, Melissa Lantsman, and Anthony Housefather of being racist or insulting against Canadian Muslims who are being killed overseas, and says they're not fit to govern. Kelly mentions quote-unquote new and alternative paths with respect to our laws in order to enforce them. There is no privilege that guards anyone in any level of society via our government or not that protects them from accountability when it comes to criminality. Is that word again? Kelly says that Palestinians have every right to protest against war and for human rights, and that Canada doesn't support war. It supplies humanitarian aid to end wars. She also asks why Chrystia Freeland still sits in office when she stole $25 million from Canadians. So, yeah, Canada does support war, unfortunately. Brutally wrong about that one. What about their time in Haiti? What about Canada's time in Chile? What about their time in Afghanistan? And so on and so forth. So, yeah, definitely needs a history lesson there for sure. And as for Chrystia Freeland, yes, she is a criminal just like any other politician, right? So, Kelly says, what do you expect when you flush a country with immigrants from a country you participated in bombing? Right. So, also, too, I just want to go back, touch on Chrystia Freeland for a sec. She has close ties with George Soros, and the Tides Foundation has a lot of finances from George Soros in particular, and they are also largely involved with the Palestine protesters as well. So, Kelly also says that our children belong to their parents. They do not belong to the state. The government has no position, has no business in your personal life, in your body, etc. So, Kelly says that Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland need to resign, and she also goes on to say that any member of parliament that does not support implementing the direct democratic process, be it through technology, be it through legislation, be it through law, does not serve you. There's no reason that 338 people are making decision for 40 million. Yeah, so she's once again just trying to push the evolved blockchain. That model is what she's trying to push out in order for direct democracy to actually occur. So, wanting to change the system and digitalize governments, essentially. She advertised the blockchain voting model that she says is 100% decentralized and comes with referendums and recalls and comes with the ability to print receipts. She says that her friend Adrian wasn't able to make it because his flight was delayed, and she invites people to go to Confederation Park in Ottawa on August 31st. And she mentions that Adrian Thomas is the founder of the Cowboys and Indians campaign. So yeah, I've interviewed Adrian Thomas myself twice, and as well, I saw him at Confederation Park and talked to him. And as well, I've talked about the Thunderbird Nationalist Party in a few different videos. So, Kelly, as well, what's interesting about her here is that she is part of the Asmen, which is a fake native tribe, essentially, that is all for UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration for Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the Biodigital Convergence, as they also support the blockchain. So, the Asmen fall under an umbrella called the Alliance of Indigenous Nations, and I've spoken about these things in other videos, which I will be linking in the description, or in a pinned comment, whichever. So, this in particular is the Parents' Rights Coalition of Canada, and Some of its partners include Action for Canada, different concerned parents organizations, Freedom Alliance Canada, Mama Bears, and as well, and various others. So Mama Bears is actually part of Police on Guard for Thee, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in the video. And this is petition E5010, and it's led by this conservative here. And so yeah, this all has to do with the detransitioning and, or sorry, with the transitioning of genders, and as well, you know, just not endorsing whatever WPATH would have to say. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about ivermectin over here. So this particular invention here discloses an ivermectin solid lipid nanoparticle. So once again, we're actually now looking at nanotechnology is what we're looking at. And so ivermectin is, again, part of the whole problem reaction solution scenario, and there are other different things such as natokinase and different ingredients or substances and that sort of a thing that either are nanomaterials or contain nanomaterials, and they are just playing another part with the biodigital convergence in and of itself. Because essentially, the way that these things are marketed is like the illusion of detoxing from spike proteins and that sort of a thing for people that took certain inoculations relating to DVOC, if you will. Sorry for the weird choice of words. DVOC, just say it backwards and you'll see exactly what I mean. I just want to leave this video on YouTube. So it says numerous strategies have been proposed to improve the dissolution rate of drugs such as ivermectin, including the application of nanotechnology-based delivery systems. These systems often incorporate a variety of nanomaterials, frequently utilizing hybrid, lipid-based, and synthetic polymer matrices. Ivermectin-loaded nanoparticles were primarily designed for antiparasitic applications, emphasizing key optimization factors such as safeguarding against degradation, enhancing permeability, ensuring physicochemical stability, controlled drug release, enhancing cutaneous penetration, and precise site-specific delivery. It is worth underscoring that despite the advancements, a comprehensive characterization and detailed understanding of targeted delivery mechanisms and drug release profiles are still lacking for many of these nanomaterials. Nanostructured carriers have unique properties that can improve drug solubility, enhancing therapeutic efficacy, and ensuring greater precision dosing. These properties are obtained via pharmacokinetic modulation. Organic and inorganic materials can be used to achieve such effects, and while organic nanomaterials stand for better biocompatibility and biodegradability, inorganic nanocarriers present higher stability and a higher loading capacity. Among the organic nanocarriers, our research group has been studying the behavior of polymeric nanocapsules, a vesicular system consisting of an oily nucleus surrounded by a polymer and a layer of hydrophilic surfactant, where the drug can be either dissolved in the core or absorbed on the polymeric wall. The presence of an oily core in nanocapsules favors the high encapsulation efficiency of hydrophobic drugs such as ivermectin. Nanocapsule structure not only stabilizes the drug in an aqueous medium, but in some cases also enables targeted delivery of the drug to specific cells or tissues. In this regard, PCL nanocapsules are versatile formulations available in liquid, semi-liquid, or solid forms. PCL, a semi-crystalline aliphatic polyester, is capable of controlling drug release and improving stability in different media. Its biodegradability and biocompatibility, make it suitable for medical devices, tissue engineering, and drug carriers. Okay, so now here just briefly going to mention the one thing from the Crypto Cloud Mind here, the Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mind. This article is by Melanie Swan of the Blockchain Institute. Crypto Cloud Mind vision is that cloud minds might constitute not only an application but a next generation platform for the realization of transhuman futures. Cloud minds could be architected as a blockchain system in which each network node is a mind, human or otherwise. So a node is the device, or it's the device that is used for the blockchain. And also, so basically the node is a mind, it's referring to human or otherwise. So what this essentially means is a lot of people will try and market one blockchain versus another and say like, oh, this is on a different server and it's decentralized. But when you think about it, humans can interact with each other, whether it be through phone or in person. It really, it's not hard for a human to interact with another human is my point, right? So if you think about each node as a human, then what I'm saying is that different blockchains then can interact with each other. So the idea of something decentralized is really just an illusion in order to sell us out, in order to sell you on this technology, if you will. So here, just going to speak very briefly here. The 1 Million March is a group that is by YYC Muslims, and one of the admins is this guy Mahmoud Mora, who seems to support Palestine in particular. And as well here, it shows that Mahmoud Mora, the Calgary police said that YYC Muslims founder, so Mahmoud is the founder of YYC Muslims, has been charged with criminal harassment and fingerprinted after multiple online interactions involving him in June. So I've not read too deeply into what these offenses, like these details and that sort of a thing, but the point I'm just making is that if a Million Man March was created by YYC Muslims, the YYC Muslims founder is Mahmoud Mora. So then as well here, just going to go over some other screenshots that I have. This is Kamal El-Sheikh right here, and he seems to be in support of Palestine in and of itself, and him or Kelly don't really seem to talk about boycott, divestment, sanctions, being that it's funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and also are involved with the Tides Foundation. So Kamal El-Sheikh in particular here, he is also part of the National Bank, and he works as a mortgage development manager. So here as well, this is him in a newspaper pretending to be a U.S. soldier, simulating the Iraq War. So he's protesting against the Iraq War, and as we can see here, this is just something that Mahmoud ended up sharing, showing that he does support Palestine in and of itself, and rather, I'm all for people protesting, and I'm all for as well people supporting Palestine, because I in no way, shape, or form am I a fan of Israel. However, fact of the matter is, you can't hope to achieve success protesting about something in Palestine when you are living in Canada or the US, let's say, and you claim you're about peace, yet you're marching down the street shouting Intifada, which means uprising, and only one solution, revolution, is also something. And so only one solution or final solution is a nod or reference toward Adolf Hitler, and then also only solution is revolution. You know, revolution comes from the word revolve, and that is just a circular motion, because every time a revolution happens, an even worse regime takes over than the one prior. So essentially, both sides of a narrative, the artificial resistance, if you will, and regime, are always controlled in history. And so we can see this with the Bolsheviks, for instance. We can see this with Vladimir Lenin and the Soviet Communist Party, how different fronts were set up by the Soviet Communist Party that appeared to be anti-Soviet, anti-communist, but were ran by the Soviets and communists. So there you have it. And now here, just to talk a little bit about Melissa Outwater, as she was speaking along with Neil Sheard on CPAC. So what happens here is they said that Melissa said that apparently Derek Noonan was apparently banned from Parliament, or as according to Neil Sheard, said that Derek Noonan was apparently banned from Parliament, and Neil Sheard is the one who organized Rolling Thunder 2022. So, and Melissa Outwater here tried to pitch a petition E5024, and Neil also talked about Canadian politicians apparently being tied to China and propagates the Winnipeg biolabs. So these biolabs are what they talk about, which apparently created the make-believe disease that was going around at the time of the so-called lockdowns, if you will, right? That ends in the number 19. But realistically, that was never isolated, so you can't even prove it's real, frankly. And also, though, as for politicians being tied to China, that is true. I'll say that much. And he also brings up George Soros and his ties to Chrystia Freeland. So that part of what he's saying is also accurate. So now to just talk here, just show this petition very briefly. I'll get to that. And this petition in particular has to do with the democratic process and talks about, you know, the turmoil of the Liberal NDP government and increasing carbon taxes and that sort of a thing. So, and the member of parliament leading this is Michelle Ferreri, which is out in Peterborough or Kawartha, and she's part of the Conservative Party. The petition was launched by Melissa Outwater. So, interestingly enough, as they talk about carbon taxes, really should be talking about carbon credits, if you will, which would run on the blockchain here. So, there's what is called the token-based economy or task-based economy, also known as the next digital economy, which I've spoken about in plenty of videos. And essentially the essentially the token-based economy is like, imagine limited tasks available and people are competing to have these tasks, and then your digital wallet gets loaded these tokens. However, your digital wallet would be a CRISPR NFT on the blockchain. An NFT is like a picture that holds data, essentially. So, yeah, gonna move forward here and talk about Melissa Outwater a little bit. Says here, I remember when Melissa drove to the Peterborough airport to wait for an American military plane to land with soldiers to arrest the Peterborough police for the QAnon queen. He's referring to Romana Didulo, who calls herself the Queen of Canada. And essentially, so Melissa was there recording what had happened when people attempted to perform citizen's arrest on police in Peterborough, and of course got arrested by the police. So, interestingly enough, it's funny that she launches a petition as she is a government employee, and as well, so she works for FedDev, So FedDev is one of the 7 regional development agencies in Canada. And basically what they do is they divide Canada into 7 regions, and they all work on different things such as building smart cities, green technology, and that sort of a thing. So they're greatly entrenched with the biodigital convergence and as well the quantum agenda, if you will. So she was essentially, her job as a program data research assistant here is to organize meetings and teleconferences and that sort of a thing. And she claims to have management experience as well as database experience. So I wonder if she's heard about FedDev's green infrastructure and aspects that play into the biodigital convergence. I'm quite sure she has, and I'd very much love to talk to her about that sometime. And then, of course, this petition E4701, which has to do with a vote of no confidence, of course. And, of course, the MP behind that is Michelle Ferrari. So, as well here, it essentially says that she sponsors a petition for a vote of no confidence. Yeah, and yeah, basically it says here that she's a government employee, of course. And then, as well, it says here that it basically talks about the citizen's arrest of the Peterborough police, so I'll be leaving those links in the description there. And just to talk very briefly about Michelle Ferrari, Member of Parliament for the Peterborough Kawartha, and was elected in 2021 federal election, and she was appointed Shadow Minister of Families, Children and Social Development as part of the Conservative Shadow Cabinet for the 44th Parliament. And she also sits as a member of the Standing Committee on the Status of Women and Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. And so it's interesting to note here as well that she's a graduate of Trent and Loyalist College, where she studied biology, anthropology, and also biotechnology. So this is interesting to be paired up with somebody that worked for one of the 7 regional development agencies, being that there would definitely be some knowledge of the green infrastructure and that sort of a thing as well. So I'm just going to go back here and just read this briefly. The blockchain-based carbon credit database systems and methods are described for a blockchain-based carbon credit database. Mineral deposits such as hydrocarbons can be analyzed via a variety of regulatory or NGO approved methods to determine size, type, or other characteristics. The deposit, depending on one or more of its features, can be converted into carbon credits, assuming said deposits are not accessed and associated with a node on the blockchain. And the carbon credits can be traded on the blockchain. Okay, so as well, I just want to say that both Brenda Bellinger and Gary Thorpe are supporting that petition as well. And then this is a map for the 7 regional development agencies. So FedDev here would be Southern Ontario, and then this is FedNor, Northern Ontario, and so on and so forth. So people can see exactly how it's divided for how Canada works on its green technology, if you will, which is definitely not so green. So this is FedDev in particular, their page, and then of course the people that are responsible for it are Philomena Tassi, who is an MP in Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas, and she served as Minister of Public Services and Procurement, Minister of Labor, and Minister of Seniors. And she's got a Bachelor of Laws from Western University, Master of Religious Education from University of St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto. and as well, she was a high school chaplain for the Catholic District School Board, and she as well established something called the Dominican Republic Education and Medical Support, and she has been greatly involved in her community, essentially through the Catholic School Board and the school system in and of itself. And then one of the other ministers here is Brian May, Parliamentary Secretary to Minister of Small Business and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister responsible for FedDev. And he represents the riding of Cambridge, and he served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defense, served as the Chair of Standing Committee on Veteran Affairs and Standing Committee on HR, Skills, and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities, and as well has experience in senior management and has held roles in the University of Waterloo, various nonprofit organizations like the YMCA and others, and coached baseball and that kind of a thing. And then the president of FedDev is Nancy Gardner, who was Assistant Deputy Minister of Programs and Operations of Women and Gender Equality Canada, where she was able to advance gender equality through significant investments in key programs, policies, and initiatives, and has held several senior leadership positions in the public service, including at Service Canada and Employment and Social Development Canada. And as well, she was raised in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, graduated from St. Mary's University in Halifax, has a Bachelor of Science, master's degree in business admin, and with the Bachelor of Science, a major in biology. Interesting. So maybe she might know a little something about the biodigital convergence as well. And then I'm just going to read a little bit of an article here. It says that FedDev announced a total repayable investment of $17.2 million to help 12 local companies commercialize their quantum products for the domestic and international markets and support 150 jobs. Makes it sound great, especially as you're working on the national quantum strategy, essentially by doing this. And of course, as well, you have these different 12 companies that are mentioned, and the biggest chunk of the investment goes to Xanadu and Crypto 4A, and the investment in and of itself is delivered through FedDev Ontario's regional quantum initiative, which committed $23 million over 6 years, so that's 2022 to 2027, to help companies advance and commercialize their quantum products. And the initiative came after the government announced the National Quantum Strategy last year, backed by an investment of $360 million committed in budget 2021 to help quantum companies and talent grow. Industry Minister Francois Philippe Champagne said that Canada was ambitious and led the way with the National Quantum Strategy and is now backing it with important investments to amplify Canada's strength in quantum science. Right. So I've left here a document that people should probably go over at some point, but it has to do with the National Quantum Strategy in and of itself. So, of course, some of the details here involved, they essentially, I'll just read this part here, make Canada a world leader in the continued development, deployment, and use of quantum computing hardware and software to the benefit of Canadian industry, governments, and citizens, and ensure the privacy and cybersecurity of Canadians in a quantum-enabled world through a national secure quantum communications network and a post-quantum cryptography initiative. The blockchain is a cryptographic system. Enable the government of Canada and key industries to be developers and early adopters of new quantum sensing technologies. Could they be talking about something like a brain-computer interface and that sort of a thing? I'll do some more research in future videos. So now I'm going to talk about the live in particular that was done by myself, and there are some lives also done by Josephine LaValle. And this is when we were at Confederation Park together along with James Scott. And also thank you, James Scott, for your research and hard work, especially when researching the biodigital convergence. So Josephine, James, and I missed the excitement of this person, Deanna Sharif, getting arrested. And it's kind of interesting that there was no footage of us at Confederation Park captured by Chris Dacey. So, and then, of course, this is another just showing that she was arrested. So, first of all, I want to say that Josephine, James Scott, and myself don't support Evolved Blockchain or the Thunderbird movement with cowboys and Indians. We had some questions for people there, which is why we went there. So, James and I strolled up to a group of people, made some conversation, and eventually we started talking to Adrian. He basically said he's there for unity, and I asked him about the PPC, so he made it because he made a TikTok supporting them. So Adrian starts talking about democracy coming from 6 nations, and he says that out of 10 people, if 3 disagree, the 3 should be listened to as everybody has to agree, whereas democracy here is like mob rules kind of a thing. He didn't use the term mob rules in particular, but just that the majority would rule, right? And he said he supports Maxime Bernier in wanting to end the Indian Act. So James comes in and mentions that he spoke to Maxime Bernier on Canada Day as well as the previous Canada Day. And during the previous one, he did a speech in front of Max and asked him what he was going to do about the policy arm in our government known as Policy Horizons, as they're responsible for the experiment known as the Biodigital Convergence, and warned the people in the PPC even though they did not want him doing the speech. So since that time, James learned that Max had spent $500 million on nanotechnology in 2006 as Minister of Industry, and the minister responsible for the National Research Council, of course, and he spent money on nano food, nano vaccines, nano geoengineering experiments, and nano and everything. And Max doesn't seem to have a solution for the people that don't want the biodigital convergence, is what James says, and I have to agree with that. So Adrian says nobody has a solution, not liberals, other than the white paper at the end of Pierre Trudeau's time as Prime Minister. James, of course, points out that none of that addresses the biodigital convergence. And Adrian says that it's all international, that he looks at the gold standard, but he's not going to suppress anybody else's voices because he may disagree with them, and says we may need pieces to have those discussions. And James points out that Max doesn't want to have that discussion, of course. So I told Adrian that Max backs out of any conversation about policy horizons, and he ran away from me when I questioned him. And that's a video on my channel I can link in the description if people are interested. So our parliamentary democracy has failed us, if you even want to call it that. And I said because it becomes mob rules, and that there's always a problem, reaction, solution scenario where a problem is created, we react, and an artificial solution is brought in, which in this case is Evolved Blockchain. Blockchain is always the system used by these technocrats to use their technology. So I name Policy Horizons the Standardization Council of Canada and any standardization organization in the world, as all countries have them. And James adds in research councils as well. So Adrian's response here, he says that there are 500 groups divided, and even welcomes Antifa to speak on stage. And I told him that the Freemasons have a phrase, which is Ordo ab Cal, which is Latin for order of chaos. So groups that have conflicting or have conflicts or conflicting views at face value combat one another, and it sets the stage for a bigger plan and reaction or artificial solution, essentially. So while James and I were conversing with Adrian, there was some sort of dispute with Antifa and some of the people at Confederation Park, and Adrian leaves the conversation to go deal with someone from Antifa. And while James and I were conversing with Adrian, there was a situation going on, so that's why he left. And then the next person we speak to is Johnny Rowe, who was at Confederation Park, but he left abruptly and said, "We're going to the Hill." And James asked Johnny, "What do you thought of the Biodigital Convergence?" Johnny says, "I'm not into it. It's bad news, brother." And this is funny because going back to February of 2024, which is when Kelly was first on CPAC in Parliament, Johnny Rowe said that the technology is changing and that they won't be able to avoid it, which is just justifying them moving in the direction of this singularity transhuman agenda, right? So James Scott and I approached Kellyanne Wolfe, and I asked if she organized what's going on in Confederation Park, and she says she didn't. And she says that they need people to speak on CPAC, apparently. And James asked Kelly what she thinks of policy horizons in the biodigital convergence, to which Kelly says, "I think that slavery is ridiculous. I think that digital slavery is ridiculous." James then asks, "But you're supporting the blockchain?" And Kelly was given some food and says, "I'm against slavery in any way, shape, or form. You have two options in the future. You're either going to become digitally enslaved, or you can take control of it." James asks, "How do you take control of it?" And Kelly responds by saying, "I don't speak tech, but if you comprehend the tech, I can put you in direct contact with the tech team because they're 100% transparent, and the white paper is almost ready to publish." James says, "I understand the tech. I study the standards regarding the tech." Kelly says, "You probably know more about it than I do." So James says, "And the standards are all hooked up to the biodigital convergence." And Kelly says, "Actually, they're all not. And there are people out there that are." And James says, "Actually, they all are and have to officially go by standards." And Kelly chimes in saying, "Okay, well, I'm not going to argue on something, just introduce you to the people so you can learn that you're wrong." So this is interesting and also childish, but essentially here I ask if Richie Markey or Damien Spalding, who are some of the people that are designing Evolved Blockchain, is going to be at Confederation Park, to which Kelly says no, they won't. So no, I tell her I'll talk to her after she eats. So this is interesting. James and I then go approach this person from Antifa here, who was sitting at the local little restaurant, little coffee shop there or whatever. And James, Josephine, and I spoke with her, and she was in opposition to Adrian and the rest of the group at Confederation Park. But she heard out James Scott and I, thankfully, and we told her about the Policy Horizons website and spoke to her about the biodigital convergence, how the standardization organizations are involved in the agenda, and how it's a worldwide agenda. So we got to get the word out to her, which is most important. And then, of course, here we have Counselor Lisa Robinson here, who didn't want to be on camera when I approached her, and I had the camera off of her when I asked if she was a politician and part of the Rotary Club, which she said was a long time ago. And this person with his back faced was also on CPAC the same day that Kelly and Lisa spoke. So I have yet to find out who that is, though. So James and I approached this particular individual named Blaine Grass, shook his hand, and spoke about someone named Suzanne Brandt, who has a report called Indigenous Perspectives on Biodigital Convergence. I'll go over it a little bit in this video, as I've done in other videos. And he tells us that Suzanne Brandt is his next door neighbor. Quite a shocker. After I explain the premise of basically that article, Indigenous Perspectives on Biodigital Convergence, is 3D bioprinting everything to essentially preserve the land. Blaine describes what I tell him as quote-unquote evolution, and the world is changing, and that's why when Native people go, or anybody goes to talk about anything in general, that's what they're always talking about. We got to get back to the land. We got to preserve the land. You know what I mean? It's written in the Great Law of Peace. We're supposed to look up to the water, the sky, the earth, everything else. So that's why we're here today, to educate and tell people what's going on and what our agenda is. James Scott says that the groups in Canada are avoiding this topic, and the majority of people are concerned about this. None of the groups in Canada are finding any solutions. So Blaine says the reason they're not finding any solutions is because it's already set in stone. And James says that we have more power than that, and if everyone was educated in the biodigital convergence, it would drastically slow down their plans and may even stop. James says that this has been happening for over 20 years at the standards level, and I say that it goes at least as far back as the International Telecommunication Union, which dates back to 1865. Kelly chimes in to say that this has been happening since ancient Babylon, and you allow them to win if you don't allow yourself to be creative, because our only purpose as humans is to create. So James talks about CRISPR kits being created, and Kelly asks James and I if we're familiar with the website 2045, which I am. James said he's not, and Kelly says she's been part of a team that's been fighting that for years. Well, all of these things here, like brain-computer interfaces and digital avatars and quantum computing and all this all runs on the blockchain anyway, so she has no idea what she's talking about, dare I say, and also as well, it's really a lazy thing to just say, oh, you know that website? Yeah, I'm against everything that's on it. So she, one, doesn't comprehend the technology, and two, is also supporting the biodigital convergence by supporting this Evolve blockchain app. So I bring up Evolve blockchain after the website is brought up, and Kelly says Evolve isn't developed yet. I said, even though it isn't developed yet, you're still using the blockchain system, and Kelly says it's 100% decentralized, as if we'd never heard that before. I said that I've heard everybody say that about whatever the server is that they talk about, and Kelly says she embraces and welcomes the criticism, but she says she's not capable to talk about the tech on it and isn't a tech expert, and she says she'll put me in direct contact with the team themselves, and they'll be happy to publicly discuss everything with me. I said I'll happily talk to Damien Spalding or Richie Marquis or anybody else involved, but anybody who is going to market and push the tech out there, you should be able to understand the tech in order to be able to market it. Kelly says she markets the political side to things, and that there's two parts to the strategy. The first part is to elect independent candidates across the board. So I once again bring up Evolve Blockchain, and I talk about Melanie Swan of the Blockchain Institute in an article entitled Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mines, and I asked Kelly if she knows what a node is on the blockchain, to which she said she doesn't. A node is a device that participates in the blockchain network, and I explained that the node can be a machine or a human or both, so nodes can communicate with one another. And I'm speaking about a node being a human being only from the perspective of that article, Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mines by Melanie Swan. So the crypto cloud mine vision is that cloud mines might constitute not only an application but a next generation platform for the realization of transhuman futures. Cloud mines could be architected as a blockchain system in which each network node is a mine, human or otherwise. And Kelly says, sure, if you think in a limited capacity. So James said he knows for a fact that all blockchain apps are involved in the convergence experiment, to which Kelly tries to get James to get involved, as he declines. He says he does not want to be part of a convergence experiment, and neither do I. So Kelly tries to say that this one is decentralized with servers that NSA, Mossad, and Five Eyes have tested. And then James and I tell her that the NSA literally created crypto, so it's a real joke that she's putting out there. So later on, this guy, Andrew Graham, comes up to speak to James and I, and we spoke to him very briefly. And when we spoke to him very briefly, Kellyanne Wolfe ended up approaching us again, and she tried to ask me to help Derek Noonan bring equipment. This is Derek Noonan, by the way. And to which I said, you want me to help Derek Noonan bring equipment to his van? Kelly says, oh, you don't oh, what, you don't get along? I said that the last time I tried to speak to him, he hid in his van and that you can ask him if you want. So Derek did hide in his van in Goderich, Ontario, after dealing with the Canadian military, and I went to go approach him and his crew, and he was peeking out of his van and quite obviously did not want to speak to me. So anyway, when I bring up Noonan hiding in his van, Kelly says, "Oh, Matt, you're a little bit forthcoming," and I responded by saying he was in the military and he can't handle something a little forthcoming. I feel sorry for the Canadian military then. Kelly says, "Well, you gotta understand, but you haven't been in the center of the web when the whole country starts coming at you with all the lies and such, so you need to be sympathetic to other people." So Josephine comes in and says Noonan is a groomer protector. Dave from the shed got taken out and he did a slander, so we have no respect for Noonan. So I'm just going to use the word peeper instead of that other word just to ensure that this stays on YouTube. Kelly responds by saying, "Teach their own, right?" And Josephine says, "Stand up for the children." And Kelly goes, "On that we can agree." That's where Josephine and I agree. And I chime in and say, "Yeah, well, if he protected a groomer, then I wouldn't want to help him, to be real with you." Kelly jumps in and says, "Was the groomer charged? Did you call the police on the groomer? You didn't call the police on a groomer? Why wouldn't you call the police on someone that you think is a groomer?" So she was trying to flip this around on me or manipulate me into saying something to be used against me while raising her voice and pointing her finger. So I said, "This doesn't have to do with me in particular," and I got interrupted by her where she says, "Really? Well, it does if you're talking about it, so if you know about it and you haven't reported it, why?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Why was Dave from the shed kicked out of the movement then?" Kelly says, "I don't know. I don't pay attention to all this nonsense. You guys enjoy talking about each other, but nobody wants to do anything. That's what's nuts." I had a call from, I had somebody from out west call me a couple of months ago to tell me that somebody else was a peeper. And I said, "Okay, good. We're gonna call the police right." I said, "Okay, good. We're gonna call the police right now. Actually, I'll call them and I'll forward them your number." Sorry, excuse me. She says, "Okay, good. We're gonna call police right now. Actually, I'll call them. I'll forward them your number," and he freaked out. "So you're complicit in the peeper-ism then? So either do something about it or shut up." And she tried to walk away after raising her voice when saying "shut up." So I said, "Police were already called, but it didn't have to do with me." Kelly said, "If you hear about it, you should report it." I said, "It's already been reported." Kelly says, "Really? Where's the report?" I responded saying, "Well, I'm not holding a report on me, am I?" She said, "Yeah, but you understand your point." I said, "I understand your point." And she says, "I'm not coming at you or attacking you. Understand my point." I said that I understand her point entirely. She said, "That's an example that needs to be set so this nonsense can stop, because if you were my son and someone made those accusations about you and they were false, there would be hell to pay." I said, "Yeah, big time, but unfortunately there's text messages of proof, right?" Kelly says, "You would be hard-pressed to find a grown man that doesn't find a young woman attractive. Now to act upon it is 100%, and I comment and say, "This is not a young woman, this is a young boy that was actually a victim of this." Kelly says, "This upsets my stomach, it makes me sick, and I've been against it my whole life, and to be honest, if I were in front of a peeper, I'd be Dexter. It would turn me into Dexter, okay? That's why I never worked for any child services or anything, plus they're all corrupt, but on top of that, but at the end of the day, these accusations are being thrown around lightly, and they're normalizing this stuff, and innocent people are falling because of it. I've watched people who would kill a peeper. I've watched their lives be destroyed and their children's lives be destroyed because of it. So I'm sick and tired of people throwing these things out loosely. Enough. I say it's not loosely if I said that there was already, but..." And Kelly interrupts and says, "I'm not talking about you, and I'm not talking about that specific situation. I'm generalizing, okay? And I'm sure that we can agree that to go after an innocent person for whatever reason with accusations like that are so destructive. They're destructive to everyone." I said, yeah. Going after an innocent person with accusations? Yeah. Kelly says, I have 6 brothers and 3 fathers, and they're all good men. I can't imagine them falling down to something like that. And the truth is, they would by someone simply saying so. That in our society needs to change. And I would fight for you too if those accusations came out. I just said, yeah, fair. And she went over to Matt Venn, who has a microphone, and said, this nonsense has to go. This has to stop. And he goes on to talk about inoculations people were coerced to take. This is Matt Venn as well, who was basically acting as damage control for Kellyanne Wolfe. And so, if anybody is wondering about Dave Live from the Shed, and if people have questions, they can reach out to me or Josephine LaValle. And James Scott said that in Klaus Schwab's book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, over 70% of the country will be voting on the blockchain. So it's interesting to note where Klaus Schwab stands with all this, and the year that it is, 2024, moving into 2025, and trying to bring out this evolved blockchain thing. So James Scott and I spoke with Sabrina Ayotte, who goes by Angel or Dark Angel, about the biodigital convergence, and covered many aspects of it, from twinning to the creation of graphene and the circular economy and synthetic biology and twinning into the metaverse with graphene and all kinds of things. So I asked her if she's Haudenosaunee, which she says she is, and which is also 6 Nations, by the way. So I asked if she's Cayuga, Seneca, or what her background is, and she said, I'll leave it this way, I am Angel, daughter of Mother Earth. So take that answer for what it is, I guess. And eventually Adrian came up to us and told us that Derek Noonan's mom has a broken leg. So he was apparently on his way, but that's kind of funny considering the fact that Kelly asked me to help Noonan earlier. So the real question is, was he hiding in his truck like he was in Goderich, or perhaps was he in a bush with a ghillie suit? I have no idea. And then, of course, as well, the Palestine rally went past the group in Confederation Park here, and they joined the march. So, I'm going to now talk a little bit about this article here, Indigenous Perspectives on Biodigital Convergence. So, the Haudenosaunee peoples, also known as the people of the Longhouse, formerly called Iroquois, are the confederacy of 6 First Nations, Mohawk, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, unified by a common goal to live in harmony. Contemporary Haudenosaunee communities can be found in upstate New York, Quebec, Ontario, Wisconsin, and Oklahoma. So now I'm going to go over another aspect of this in particular as we dive into synthetic biology. So Mama Day's words evoke the Haudenosaunee principle, good mind, which is derived from the Great Law of Peace. And the good mind occurs when people put their minds and emotions in harmony with the flow of the universe. The good mind confers the ability to make a sound judgment for the welfare of the broader Haudenosaunee society. Connect good mind to land. To the Haudenosaunee, the good mind and land are inseparable, for neither is possible without the other. Furthermore, rightly assert that where one is has everything to do with who one is. What we take from all of this is that the full expression of our humanity is only possible through intimate connection to each other, to territory, and the various natural cycles shaping existence. So, Policy Horizons Canada Exploring Biodigital Convergence paper identifies an important policy question. Could traditional resource-based competitive advantages fade? And suggests that decentralized food production through synthetic biology could lead to the ability to create food and engineer meat without the need for arable land. So, essentially, once again, talking about 3D bioprinting everything to preserve the land. And as they talk about decentralized food production, this form of synthetic biology, of course, would run on the blockchain. Go figure. So, Now to go a little bit, talk about Neil Sheard a little bit here, who was with Melissa Outwater on CPAC. Neil here essentially was advertising for an event in Ottawa that is upcoming on September the 16th. We the people demand no traitors in our house. And so, as well, too, Neil is actually part of Police on Guard for Thee. And here's an article from March of 2021 where it says he joined, and he's done 12 years of service in the Canadian Armed Forces and is a retired corporal. I would actually be curious of not only Neil, but anybody from V4F, and Veterans for Freedom, or any sort of group of ex-police or ex-military, what their relationship with Marcus Ray is. So, be talking about Marcus Ray ever so briefly. I've already done different videos about him in the past, however, and then we see his plans, if you will, which were basically trials in the street for these politicians. You can see these plans kind of rebranded and remodeled through things like the Save the Children convoy, which we'll be getting to. So they call themselves the Guardians of Humanity. This is a group that apparently Marcus Ray is a part of that I did not know about until recently. They made an accidental debut at a BC Town Hall rally in Kelowna last week. This is from March 18th, 2024. When 4 members appeared wearing uniforms with their official crest, tactical gear, partial stab-proof vests, and 2 of them storing handcuffs in their belts. 2 had the words security velcroed onto their backs, and 2 others had the words emergency response. So they weren't there in any official capacity because they are still in training, an organizer said. Training for what? And so it says the way we see it is we think within 5 years all hell is going to break loose. Team leader Marcus Ray told infonews.ca, like riots in the streets, and we believe that law enforcement is going to need a helping hand. And there are dozens of members across BC and more starting to join in Alberta, with hundreds more expressing interest. Ray says they are mostly older professionals, 90% former police, military, security, fire, and other emergency responders, while many members, including Ray, say they are trained security officers. Others are still training and getting licensed. They are also learning first aid, getting fire training, and other certifications. They have no affiliations with official agencies like the RCMP or BC Wildfire, but they're hoping to become partners down the road. I'm not actually sure how true that is, to be honest with you. And it says here what I want to do with this group is I want to be able to be at the other end of the phone when that call comes, and hope to God it never comes, he says. That's who we are. Right. And so he also stresses that they're not active currently, but they expect to be in roughly a year. They train on land in Beaverdale, and he says he has informed the RCMP about training activities and even worked with the RCMP in a limited capacity, and they're good with it, he says. And the Kelowna RCMP did not respond to a request for comment. Now, that's kind of fishy there. I would be curious to know how closely connected they are with the RCMP, because people that have watched my prior videos where I talk about Marcus Ray, he is formerly RCMP. So, Marcus Ray from Kelowna, started organizing with Allison Koch from Vancouver sometime after the Freedom Trucker rally in 2022. Now, that is his business partner, and what is interesting about his business partner is the fact that she has this salon called Man Up Grooming that was actually all for the mandates. So that is definitely quite a contradiction for what Marcus Ray claims to stand for. So it says here about the spokesman and leader of a paramilitary organization training on a ranch south of Kelowna was excommunicated from the Freedom Movement because Freedom Movement organizers because he was considered too extreme and was accused of calling for violence. And his real name is Marcus Anthony Ray Chilcott, by the way. He was at the center of the Freedom Trucker rally in Ottawa in January 2022, posting dozens, even hundreds of videos from the event. And a few months after, in June of 2022, he announced controversial plans to train what he called constitutional sheriffs, which is a spin-off of an American idea. So other people that were involved with Marcus Ray would be like Christopher James was involved with him of a Warrior Calls, and as well Dallas Hills of Constitutional Conventions was involved with them. I'm not sure if they are still involved with them in particular, but the point here is that in particular there are veterans involved in this situation, which we will get to. It says that he planned to bring a large number of these people to the RCMP depot in Regina, along with simultaneously staging protests at RCMP stations across the country on September 11th, 2022. He was accused by Vets for Freedom of planning to wear uniforms, arrest people, and try them in a constitutional courtroom. Well, okay, this is interesting because Marcus Ray's plans consisted of ex-police and ex-military, and that's exactly what Police on Guard for Thee and what Vets for Freedom are. Now, this was published in David Mackenzie's Canadian Trucker magazine. I took this screenshot from a video of mine. And so it says here, all brothers and sisters from Turtle Island are hereby invited by the authority of the Great Spirit to the sovereign unceded territory of the hereditary Algonquin Nation to peacefully assemble and parley regarding a constitutional confederacy on or before December 21st, 2023. The invitation is granted under the international flag of peace. A white square flag must be flown. No rectangular corporate flags will be allowed during this peaceful event. Yeah, and then there are other names of different people here, such as Gordon Berry in particular. And as well, this particular guy, Sean Bradley, aka Iron Crow, we'll be getting to in a second. But the point that I'm getting at is that around that time, so the Save the Children convoy, as they called themselves, was supporting what was written in that Canadian Trucker magazine. And you have names of supposedly different First Nations people, although I'm not sure if they actually are First Nations. And as well, you have you had Gordon Berry written as a quote-unquote settler. So what's interesting is that Vets for Freedom came out with this video supposedly leaking the plans of the Save the Children convoy, but the person who did the narrating in the video is this guy named Sean Bradley, who also goes by the name Iron Crow. He does not claim to be native, by the way. But the point that I'm getting at about Sean Bradley here is he is friends with Gordon, who was part of the Save the Children convoy, yet Sean Bradley was partaking in the supposed leak of Vets for Freedom. This leak, if you will, was all just part of the plan, right? And the Save the Children convoy wanted to go to different, I guess you could say, critical locations like Parliament, Privy Council, the Department of Defense, the Records Library, and different things like this in order to arrest these people, supposedly, right? And the point is that why would somebody who works closely with Gordon be ratting out Gordon and the Save the Children convoy, whose plans were pretty much identical to Marcus Ray's? It's all just basically what happens is it's almost like these things that happen are all just dress rehearsals for some bigger plan that they have. And so ultimately, like, this is what they're all a part of. And every, they'll say that they don't want a revolution, if you will, but if you are going to go attempt to arrest people in Parliament, you are going to create very well what you apparently oppose, which is a revolution. And what's kind of funny too is that that Policy Horizons wasn't mentioned as one of their locations to go after, which is kind of interesting for sure, considering it is created by the Privy Council and is very well they are the face in Canada of the biodigital convergence, right? And we don't hear them addressing that. So, or at least they only mention small parts of it and don't really talk about the big picture, right? They tend to focus on the coerced, the experimental injections, let's say, if you will, that certain people were coerced to take. So we see here, this is Allison Koch, by the way, which is Marcus Ray's business partner, if you will. And then these others here, Glenn is a former surgical nurse, has a background in security, drives various vehicles like trucks, and is a volunteer firefighter. Arlen here has a background in firefighting and is an active member in the International Association of Firefighters, Local 249, so she's involved in the union. And as well, then you have Wes down here, who is the founder of something called Business Impact and is a business consultant, essentially. And then you have Allison Koch over here, who has had experience managing restaurants and as well, like I said, is the owner of something called Man Up Grooming. So, and the way I had found out about her was that I found a picture of her at something called Terminal City Club out in BC, which is where different rich figures, if you will, would meet up to discuss business plans or have wine and cheese parties or whatever, you know, people like the Bronfmans and that sort of a thing. But she was attending something called the Zajac Ranch for Children. Zajac, Z-A-J-A-C, probably not pronouncing that right, is a Polish surname and a notable Polish family in Canada. So, and that ranch also too mandated the experiment as well. So there's another contradiction right there for what Marcus Ray claims to stand for. So all in all, I intend to figure out what's going on, and these plans will not come to fruition if people are vocal and speak up, and I would encourage others to do the same, and also to do their own research on some of these people, as well as look into the biodigital convergence, as there are so many facets of it that you can't cover speaking about all of it in one video or one sitting. So, thanks everybody for watching, and everybody should check out James Scott at Barely Bruised Books. I will leave his contact information in a pinned comment, and as well, if anybody wants to reach out to me for questions, feel free. And they can find me on Facebook at Matt Unseated or on YouTube at Matt the Unseated. So, thanks everybody for watching, and take care of yourselves.